Lena Marsh had not planned on hiring a mechanic to run her foundation's emergency generator during the most important gala of the decade. But when the certified electrical contractor her team had booked 3 months in advance called at 6:15 in the morning to say his crew had walked off a job site dispute and he could not guarantee availability, and when the backup vendor's phone rang out 4 times in a row, and when her operations director knocked on her office door with the expression of someone delivering a death sentence dressed up as a logistical update, the name that surfaced was the only name anyone had. Evan Pruitt. Contract work. Available. He arrived at the Marsh Foundation building at 7:40 with a toolbox that had seen real use and a canvas jacket that had been washed recently but not replaced in some time. He was 41 years old, somewhere in the territory of average height and unremarkable build, with hands that showed the specific wear of someone who worked with them every day, and a face that gave away very little. He did not introduce himself with any particular warmth or salesmanship. He said his name, confirmed the equipment model from the work order without being told, and asked where the main panel was. Lena watched him for 3 seconds from across the lobby. Then she looked at her operations director, Sandra. "This is the best you found?" "This is the only one who picked up." Lena walked back toward the elevators. The gala was in 11 hours. The Foundation's annual gathering for medical research benefactors, the event she had spent 4 months building toward, the evening that would determine whether 2 critical endowments renewed or redirected their funding to institutions with fewer operational headaches. Everything had to work. The lights, the sound, the climate control, the backup power for the presentation equipment, everything. She did not think about Evan Pruitt again until 40 minutes later, when Sandra appeared in her doorway and said he had found a second fault in the primary conduit that the original contractor's assessment had completely missed. He found it how? He said the load distribution pattern was off. He calculated it by hand before he even opened the secondary panel. Lena set her pen down. "Has he fixed it?" "He's fixing it now. He says it would have tripped the backup system 40 minutes into the event." She did not go down to the basement immediately. She had a call with the Foundation's legal counsel in 8 minutes and a board member arriving at 10. But when the call ended and the board member's visit ran shorter than expected, she took the stairs rather than the elevator and found Evan on his back beneath the secondary panel with a headlamp on, moving with the unhurried efficiency of someone who understood exactly what he was doing and did not need an audience to confirm it. "Sandra says you found a second fault." "Third," he said, without looking up. "The second is in the junction behind the east wall. I'll get to it after this. The original contractor assessed this system 2 weeks ago. I know, I saw his report on the work order." A pause. He missed the load calculation entirely. He was looking for obvious failures. He wasn't looking at the system as a system. He said it without contempt. It was the tone of a person describing a fact rather than winning an argument. Lena stood in the basement of her own building and felt the specific disorientation of someone who had underestimated a situation she thought she had already assessed. "What time will you be finished?" "Noon, if nothing else turns up. 2 o'clock if it does." She went back upstairs. His phone buzzed once while she was leaving. She did not hear what it said. In the car on the way to a mid-morning donor meeting across town, her driver was stuck in construction delay on 5th, and she had 12 minutes of stillness she had not planned for. She found herself thinking about the way Evan had said the third fault without breaking from his work, the complete absence of performance in it, the way he had described the original contractor's failure as a methodological problem rather than a personal one. She had spent 11 years running the Marsh Foundation. She had built it from a memorial endowment in her late husband's name into one of the region's largest independent medical research funders. She had learned to read people the way she had once learned to read grant applications, quickly for the architecture beneath the presentation, and she had developed over those 11 years a finely calibrated instinct for when a person was what they appeared to be. Evan Pruitt was not what he appeared to be. She did not know yet what he was. But the wrongness of the fit, a man with that kind of systematic intelligence working contract day labor, sat in the back of her mind like a loose thread she had not yet decided to pull. The donor meeting ran long. By the time she returned to the building at 1:15, Evan had finished the primary panel and the east wall junction, and was running a full load test on the backup system, with the attention of someone checking their work 3 times before calling it done. Sandra stood nearby with a tablet, monitoring the readouts with more focus than she usually gave electrical systems. "How's it looking?" Lena said. "Clean," Sandra said. "Cleaner than before the original contractor came." Evan shut the panel, straightened, and pulled the headlamp off. "The system will hold tonight. If you run the presentation equipment on the east circuit and keep the catering warmers on west, you'll have 15% headroom before you're anywhere near load threshold." He said it to both of them without distinguishing between employer and employee. "I'd recommend not using the auxiliary stage lights and the AV rack simultaneously during the keynote. Run them sequenced, 30 seconds apart." Lena looked at him. "Do you want to write that down, or should I have someone? I'll send a diagram to whoever is running your technical setup tonight." He looked at Sandra. "What's the email?" He was already reaching for his phone. On the screen, for a brief moment before he closed the notification, Lena saw the corner of a message. A school name. A pickup time. She looked away. The afternoon collapsed into the compacted urgency of final preparations. Florists, catering, the AV crew who arrived at 3 and immediately did the opposite of what Evan had recommended. Sandra spent 20 minutes correcting them. Lena spent the same 20 minutes on a call with the Foundation's largest institutional benefactor, a hospital network whose board had been quietly discussing redirecting their endowment. She had heard about it through a colleague, not through any official communication, the kind of thing that reached you only when it had already been decided elsewhere. And people wanted to see how you'd respond. She responded the way she always responded, calmly, precisely, without showing the specific cold dread of a person who understood that the Foundation's operating future depended on that renewal. At 4:30, Evan reappeared in the main hall without being called. He had seen the AV crew's setup from the corridor and walked in with the quiet purposefulness of someone who has identified a problem that doesn't belong to them, but will affect everyone if it isn't corrected. "Your generator won't sequence properly with that configuration," he said to no one in particular, though he was speaking to the crew. "You've looped the stage left monitors back through the primary circuit. During a power transition, it'll create a feedback spike." The lead technician looked at him the way technicians look at people who are not technicians. "Sir, we've been doing this for." "I know," Evan said. "I'm not saying you don't know your equipment. I'm saying the panel in this building is not standard. I rewired the east junction this morning. The load mapping is different from what the spec sheet says. If you want to test it, I can show you." He did not raise his voice. He did not repeat himself. He waited. The technician looked at Sandra, who looked at Lena. Lena said, "Test it." The test took 6 minutes. The feedback spike occurred exactly as Evan had predicted, at low power, controlled, causing no damage. The AV crew reconfigured without further discussion. In the corridor afterward, Lena found Evan standing at the window that looked out over the east courtyard, which was being set with tables by the catering staff, jacket off, leaning against the wall with the posture of someone accustomed to waiting. His phone was in his hand. He was looking at it, but not quite at it, the particular unfocused look of someone thinking about something a long distance from where they were standing. "Thank you," she said, "for the panel thing." He looked up. It needed doing. She leaned against the opposite wall without quite intending to. "You calculated the load distribution by hand before you opened the secondary panel. It's faster, for some people." He didn't respond immediately. In the courtyard below, someone dropped a tray stand. It rang against the stone loud enough to echo up. "What did you do before contract work?" she said. The pause was brief but present. "Engineering," he said. "Systems design." She waited. He didn't add to it. "Where?" "Different places." He looked back out the window. "I have to leave by 5:30. My daughter gets out of extended program at 6, and the drive is 40 minutes. The subject had been moved. She recognized the maneuver because she used it herself. She let it go. "Will you be here tonight if something comes up with the system?" A pause. "I can be. She's with my neighbor on Tuesdays until 8. Lena pushed off the wall. 500 for the evening on standby. Call it insurance. He looked at her for a moment with an expression that was not quite readable. Then he said, "All right." The gala opened at 7. 240 guests. The warm particular noise of money and philanthropy in the same room. The clinking, and the introductions, and the practiced ease of people who spent their lives in these gatherings. Lena moved through it the way she always did, present at every conversation and fully absorbed by none, tracking the room the way her late husband had taught her to track a hospital floor, with her peripheral vision for the thing that was out of place. What was out of place was Raymond Stokes. Raymond Stokes was 64 years old, a former hospital administrator turned private equity strategist, and he had been on the foundation's advisory board for 8 years. He had also, in the past 3 months, been meeting privately with 2 of the foundation's largest institutional donors. Lena had known about the meetings. She had not known until 48 hours ago, through a contact at a law firm she trusted, that the meetings had included discussion of a governance restructure proposal that would effectively fold the Marsh Foundation's endowment management into a new consolidated vehicle under Stokes's firm. The proposal had never been brought to her. She had spent 2 days confirming what she had heard. She had spent 1 more day deciding what to do with it, and she was standing at the edge of the East Terrace with a glass of water she was not drinking, watching Raymond Stokes work the institutional donors with the practiced warmth of someone who had been planning this for considerably longer than 3 months. When she heard a voice at her shoulder, "The East Monitor Bank is running warm. I rerouted it 10 minutes ago. You won't notice anything, but I wanted you to know." Even. He had come in through the service entrance, jacket replaced with something marginally more suited to the event, and stood half a step behind her in the position of someone who understood the geometry of a room. "Thank you," she said without turning. A pause. "The man in the blue tie," Evans said, "near the donor tables. He's done that 3 times in the last 20 minutes. Done what?" Excused himself from a conversation, crossed to the same corner, checked his phone, and then returned to a different donor than the one he left. He's moving through the room with a sequence. He knows exactly who he's going to talk to next. Lena watched. Raymond Stokes excused himself from a couple near the presentation stage, checked his phone in the northwest corner, and turned to intercept the director of the hospital network endowment before the man had completed his turn from the bar. "He's not networking," Evan said. "He's executing." She turned to look at him. He was watching the room with the specific attention of someone who had learned to read spatial patterns the way other people read text. "You've seen that before," she said. He did not answer immediately. "I've seen things that looked like it," he said. She looked back at Stokes. "What do you know about governance restructures in nonprofit endowment management?" A beat. More than a building electrician should. She waited. He said, "Is that what's happening?" "I think so." Silence. Below the terrace, the city moved in its indifferent ongoing way. "What do you need?" Evan said. She had not expected him to say that. She had expected him to step back, to recede into the role he had been hired for, the way people who are given a narrow purpose generally stay inside its walls. "I need to understand how far along it is," she said, "and whether the donors have already committed." "The woman in the green dress has committed," Evan said. Her body language changed when Stokes spoke to her. She was uncertain before he reached her and settled after. Whatever he said, it resolved something she had been sitting with. Lena set her water glass on the terrace railing. She thought about 11 years. She thought about the research initiatives in her husband's name. She thought about the 2 graduate fellows they were funding through their 3rd year, and the clinical trial for a pediatric cardiac treatment that no hospital system, with a return to capital obligation, would ever fully fund on its own. She thought about what it meant to have built something with the correct intentions and have someone else decide they could manage it better. "How long have you been watching him?" she said. "Since I came in," Evan said. He was the first person in the room who wasn't where he was supposed to be. She looked at him again. In the light coming off the interior of the hall, his face was composed in the particular way she had noticed that morning in the basement. Not blank, but managed. The expression of a person who had learned a long time ago that what they showed and what they knew were 2 separate things that did not always need to meet. "Tell me what you actually do," she said. This time the pause was longer. "I used to run systems failure analysis for medical device companies," he said. "Full life cycle. I assessed where institutional structures failed before they failed. Contracts, supply chains, governance models." He said it the way someone states a fact they have become unattached to. "That was before my wife died." The words sat in the air between them without drama. "I'm sorry," she said. "It was 4 years ago," he said. Ruby was 3. She understood immediately and did not say so. The math of a 3-year-old and a father who chose contract work over institutional employment was not complicated if you knew what you were looking for. He had made himself smaller deliberately, not because he lacked the capacity for the larger thing, but because the larger thing had risks that a man with a 4-year-old could not afford. "She's 7 now," Lena says. 7.5. "She will tell you the half matters." The corner of his mouth moved. It was the first thing close to warmth she had seen on his face all day, and it passed quickly. Below them, Raymond Stokes was steering the hospital network director toward a table in the far corner where 2 other men were already seated. Men Lena recognized as associated with Stokes's firm. "He's closing something tonight," Lena said. "Yes," Evan said. "I need documentation of what he's proposed to the donors and in what form. I don't have that." "No," she said, "but I know someone who does." She excused herself. She found Foundation's general counsel, a precise and unhurried woman named Helen Oakes, near the bar, and spent 4 minutes telling her what she knew. Helen did not change her expression during those 4 minutes. When Lena finished, Helen set down her drink with the careful deliberateness of someone resetting her priorities for the evening and took out her phone. Evan remained at the edge of the terrace. When Lena returned, he was watching the room with the same quiet focus. "There's one more thing," he said. She waited. "Your backup generator. When I was replacing the junction panel this morning, I found a bypass installed in the manual override circuit. It's recent. Within the last 60 days. He looked at her. "If someone triggered it remotely, your backup system would fail a power transition. Not catastrophically, but in a way that would look like a malfunction." Lena stood very still. "A malfunction during tonight's gala," she said. "During the keynote presentation. The one where your major donors are in the room." She thought about the original contractor who had assessed the system 2 weeks ago. She thought about who had recommended that contractor. She thought about Raymond Stokes, who had been on the advisory board for 8 years and who had access to vendor recommendations. "You removed it?" she said. "This morning," Evan said. "I didn't know what it meant then. I thought it was old equipment someone had patched badly. I documented it because I document everything." He paused. "I know what it means now." She looked at him for a long moment. Not the assessing look of an employer reviewing a hire, but the more direct attention of someone recalibrating toward a person who had just revealed themselves to be considerably larger than the frame they had been asked to stand in. "You should have told me this morning," she said. "I didn't have context for it this morning," he said. "You've given me context tonight." That was fair. She recognized it as fair and did not argue. The keynote ran at 8:30. Lena gave it herself, 40 minutes on the Foundation's current research portfolio and the clinical initiatives in development. The system ran clean. Every light, every monitor, every audio transition. Evan stood in the back corridor entire time with his phone in his pocket and his eyes on the electrical panel readout that Sandra had propped open for him. Raymond Stokes sat in the third row. He applauded with everyone else. He was still performing certainty. He did not know that Helen Oakes had spent the previous 90 minutes quietly collecting signed communications from 2 of the 3 institutional donors. Documentation showing they had been presented with governance restructure terms without board disclosure, and had been given a deadline of tonight to indicate informal commitment. He did not know that the third donor, the hospital network director, had been intercepted by a board member Lena trusted, and had, when shown the terms in writing alongside the Foundation's own governance protocols, indicated that he had understood the proposal to be board approved. He had not been deceived, he had simply not been given the complete picture. After the event closed and the guests had filtered out, and the catering crew was moving through the hall with the efficient impersonality of people paid to make an evening disappear, Lena found Raymond Stokes near the coat check. She did not have a long conversation with him. She did not need one. She told him, in the specific language of institutional governance, that the board would be reviewing the materials Helen Oakes had collected and that a formal advisory board meeting had been scheduled for the following week. She told him that she wanted to give him the opportunity to bring his proposal forward through the appropriate channels before the review concluded. His face during that conversation was the face of a man who had understood the game had changed and was recalculating in real time. He was gracious about it in the practiced way of someone who had been caught at things before, and knew that graciousness was a form of strategic retreat. When he left, Lena stood in the empty lobby for a moment, with the particular stillness of a person who has held something together by sustained effort and is only now allowing themselves to acknowledge how close it came to breaking. Evan was near the service exit, toolbox in hand, jacket back on. "The system's locked and logged," he said. "I left the panel diagram with Sandra and a written account of the bypass find. Dates, photos, documentation." He paused. "You'll want that for whatever comes next." "Yes," she said. "I will." She looked at him in the half-light of the lobby with the service exit behind him and the city visible through the glass of the front doors, late and quietly lit. "Ruby," she said. "Is she named after anyone?" Something in his expression shifted. Not opened exactly, but unlocked from the other side. "My wife liked the stone," he said. "Said it was the only gem that held light differently depending on the angle. She thought that was a good thing to grow up knowing." He looked at his hands briefly, then back up. "I think she was right." Lena did not have an immediate answer for that. She was not a person who performed emotion or rushed toward it, and she was standing in her own building at 11:15 at night, having narrowly preserved something she had spent over a decade building, and she thought that the man in front of her had helped her do it without being asked to, without being paid to, and without ever once presenting himself as something other than what he was willing to be in that moment. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she said. "Not for electrical work. I want someone who reads rooms the way you do at the table when we debrief what happened tonight. I'll pay your day rate." He considered it in the way he considered things, without filling the silence prematurely. "Ruby has school," he said. "I can be here by 9:30. 9:30, she said. He went out through the service exit. She stood in the lobby for another moment, then turned and walked back through the hall, where the caterers were folding the last of the linens, and the lights were at the low end of their dimmer, and the room that had held 240 people 3 hours ago was becoming itself again. Quiet and empty, and hers. She had not saved it alone. That was new. In the weeks that followed, the Foundation's board convened a full governance review. Raymond Stokes resigned from the advisory board on the 4th day of the review, citing scheduling conflicts of a professional nature that no one in the room believed, and no one challenged directly. The documentation Helen Oakes had gathered, combined with Evan's written account of the bypass installation, was referred to the State Attorney General's office. The process would be long. These things always were. Lena commissioned an independent infrastructure audit of all the foundation's buildings. She hired a new operations director of facilities with a background in systems engineering. She changed vendors. She changed protocols. She did the structural work that should have been done years earlier, when she had been too busy building the public face of the foundation to look closely enough at its bones. Evan came in on that first Thursday. He sat across from Lena and Helen Oakes and Sandra and walked through the evening's events in the patient, methodical way of someone accustomed to reconstructing failure chains, which was what it had been. A failure chain, and naming each link without drama. He came in twice more over the following month when the Attorney General's office had questions about the bypass documentation. He answered them the same way he answered everything, precisely, with no additional interpretation. With the underlying patience of a person who understood that what facts meant was less important than what they said. Somewhere in that second visit, Sandra mentioned offhandedly that the man had a daughter who had apparently informed her father after a school assignment on careers that she wanted to be either an astronaut or an electrician, and that Evan had told her both required the same core skill, which was understanding how systems worked before they broke. Lena heard that and did not comment. But she thought about it for the rest of the afternoon. The first time she saw Ruby was accidental. Evan had a late meeting with the foundation's legal team that ran longer than expected, and the neighbor who usually took evening pickups had a conflict, and he had asked Sandra, slightly awkwardly, whether there was any possibility, and Sandra had said of course, and Ruby had arrived at 4:45 with a backpack that was functionally a library in canvas form, and the specific self-possession of a child who was accustomed to being in adult spaces and had decided they were manageable. She introduced herself as Ruby Pruitt, full name, the way children do when they have been taught that their whole name is theirs to give. She looked at Lena with the open calculation of a person who has not yet learned to disguise curiosity. "Are you the one whose building Dad fixed?" "I am." He said the previous electrician didn't look at it as a system. She appeared to consider this a satisfying explanation. "He says that's why most things go wrong. People look at the pieces." Lena looked at Ruby for a moment, then at the bookshelf along the south wall of the conference room, and asked if she wanted to pick something to read while the adults finished. Ruby selected 3 books, stacked them in a very particular order, and sat at the far end of the conference table, with the headphones she produced from a side pocket of her backpack, and that was the end of her requiring anything from the room. When Evan came in an hour later, he looked at Ruby first, the automatic parental accounting, and his expression did the thing it did when he looked at her, released something that was not present in any other configuration of his face. "She picked 3 books," Lena said. "She always picks 3, he said. "One to read, one to hold, one in case the other 2 aren't right. That's very systematic. She comes by it honestly." Lena smiled. It was a real one, not the practiced warmth of a foundation director in a public setting, but the involuntary kind, the kind that happens before a person has decided to have it. Evan noticed. He did not remark on it, but he noticed, and the quality of the room changed slightly in the way rooms change when something has been acknowledged without being spoken. The second time she saw Ruby was not accidental. Lena had mentioned a science exhibition at the Natural History Museum, had said she had been meaning to go for 2 months, had 2 passes she hadn't used. Evan had said Ruby had already read most of the catalog online, which was the kind of thing Ruby did. Lena had said that in that case Ruby could be their guide. They went on a Saturday. Ruby guided them with the authority of someone who had done the reading and considered it her professional obligation to share it efficiently. At the Geological Survey exhibit, she told them that rubies formed under the same tectonic pressure that built mountains, which meant that every ruby that existed was evidence of something enormous having happened underground. Evan looked at the display and said nothing. Lena looked at him, looking at it. On the walk back to the parking structure, Ruby reached up and took Lena's hand at a corner without particularly deciding to, in the automatic way of a child whose body makes social calculations faster than her mind does. She held it for the length of the crossing and released it on the other side, already moving toward the elevator, already explaining something about igneous rock formations. Lena did not say anything about it. Evan, walking on her other side, did not say anything about it either. But on the drive home he asked, without significant preamble, whether she would want to get dinner sometime. Somewhere quiet. He said he was not good at the larger version of things, but he was trying to get better at asking directly. She said yes. She said it without performing certainty, which was the same way she had said the most important things in her life. And he received it the same way he received information that confirmed a calculation he had been running quietly for some time. They had dinner on a Tuesday. It was quiet and ran longer than either of them had scheduled. Ruby was with the neighbor. Lena ordered the fish and did not look at her phone once, which Evan noticed and did not mention, but would remember later as the thing that told him what he needed to know. She had spent 11 years running a foundation named for a man she had loved, building something in his memory, making it last. She had done it well and done it mostly alone, which was not the same as wanting to. Evan had spent 4 years making himself smaller than he was, because smaller was safer for a 3-year-old who had already lost one parent and could not afford to lose another. He had gotten very good at it. He was beginning to understand that Ruby was 7.5 now, and the half mattered, and there were things a person could allow themselves again when the ground had solidified enough to build on. The city moved past the window of the restaurant at the hour when it shifts from urgent to settled. Neither of them rushed. They were both people who had learned the hard way that the best systems were not the ones that looked impressive at first assessment. They were the ones that held under pressure, that had been built with enough honesty about their own weak points to survive when something went wrong. It was, Lena thought, looking at the man across the table who had once spent a morning finding faults that everyone else had missed, not a bad place from which to start.